Natalie Carter's first day at Ashford Enterprises in the heart of Manchester was nothing short of a disaster. The grand lobby, with its towering glass walls that reflected the grey city skyline, was supposed to be a place of welcoming and opportunity. Instead, it became the stage for a humiliating spectacle as she stood there, her damp white blouse clinging uncomfortably to her skin. A privileged intern named Connor Hayes, his slicked-back blonde hair and expensive blazer marking him as the kind of man who thought the world owed him everything, stepped forward with a smug grin. Without warning, he tilted a full cup of fizzy cola straight into her face. "Oops, thought you were one of the cleaning staff," Connor sneered, laughter bubbling around him like a dark cloud. The sticky soda dripped down Natalie's neck, soaking her neatly tied-back chestnut hair and her modest pearl earrings. Her gray slacks were now clinging awkwardly, the fabric heavy and damp. The laughter exploded, sharp and cruel. "She looks like she just crawled out of the basement." A voice jeered. Natalie didn't flinch. She didn't wipe the soda away. Her soft hazel eyes scanned the crowd, steady and unyielding. The laughter faltered, uneven as an engine sputtering to a stop. A few people shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Someone coughed. Then, just as the room seemed ready to dissolve into chaos, the CEO himself emerged from his glass-walled office. Jonathan Ashford was young, early 30s, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and a tailored suit that whispered power. His eyes locked onto Natalie's as he stepped forward, bowing deeply before the entire office. "Please welcome the new chairwoman of Ashford Enterprises," he announced, his voice calm but commanding. Natalie stood there, the cola still tacky on her skin, her blouse now slightly wrinkled from the ordeal. Her hair, pulled into a tight bun, glistened under the harsh fluorescent lights. She wore simple black flats, the kind that sacrificed style for function, and a delicate silver necklace, a subtle nod to her old money heritage. She carried herself not like an intern, but like someone who belonged exactly where she was. Connor's smirk faltered. His eyes flicked away as Natalie's jaw clenched ever so slightly, the silence thickening the air between them like a thunderstorm ready to break. The crowd's whispers trailed off as Natalie moved toward the elevator, her steps measured and confident despite the damp discomfort. But not everyone was ready to let her pass so easily. A trio of junior account managers in designer suits and flashy watches blocked her path. Leading them was a tall woman with platinum blonde hair cut into a sharp bob, her sneer like a razor. "Excuse me," she said, voice loud enough to draw attention. "This elevator's for staff only. Trainees use the service lift in the back. Smells like garbage, but you'll fit right in." The others laughed, eyes raking over Natalie's damp blouse and ill-fitting slacks. She paused, her hand hovering over the button, then turned to face the woman. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. "I'll take the stairs," she said evenly, her voice soft but razor-sharp. The group exchanged uneasy glances. The blonde tossed her hair and hit the button, muttering, "Whatever." "She's nobody." Natalie's heels clicked steadily up the staircase, the echoes of her solitary footsteps filling the empty shafts of the building. She didn't need to prove anything, not yet. The folder tucked under her arm, stamped confidential, was proof enough. Later, as the office buzzed with a networking mixer near the open bar, Natalie stayed on the periphery, watching. She noted how the staff orbited around the powerful, the executives with their corner offices and their expensive suits. Connor was still at the center of a group, tossing out jokes with a cruel edge. Nearby, Vanessa Blythe, a striking woman in a tight red dress that clung to her curves like a second skin, laughed too loudly, flipping her long blonde hair. Natalie's eyes caught a flicker of movement. Margaret Lawson, a senior advisor in her 60s with steel-gray hair cut into a severe bob, standing apart from the crowd. Margaret's gaze found Natalie's, and something shifted in the older woman's eyes. Recognition, not pity. Without a word, Margaret approached, heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, and handed Natalie a thick folder stamped with a red confidential mark. A direct message from the chairman. Margaret whispered, voice low and urgent. "You're to review the restructuring blueprint before tonight's closed meeting." Natalie nodded, her fingers steady as she took the folder. Nearby, A junior employee overheard and stammered. "Wait, chairwoman? Who?" But Natalie said nothing. She simply nodded a quiet thank you and walked away, the weight of the folder grounding her like an anchor amidst the swirling storm of office politics. Later, in a crowded break room, a group of marketing associates clustered around her as she reached for a paper towel to dab at her sticky blouse. A man with gelled hair and a loud tie leaned casually against the counter, blocking her path. "You know we've got a dress code here," he said mockingly. "That outfit's giving thrift store clearance rack vibes." His friends snickered and one even snapped a photo, the flash catching Natalie's tired eyes. Another chimed in, "Post that with office fail." Natalie's hand paused, her shoulders stiffening just enough for them to notice. She lifted her gaze, locking eyes with the man. "Is that all you've got?" she asked softly, her voice cutting through the room like a finely honed blade. The room fell silent. The man's grin faltered as he scrambled for a comeback, but Natalie was already walking away, leaving the crumpled paper towel on the counter. The hallway was quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound echo, the soft squeak of her flats on the carpet, the hum of the air conditioning. Passing a glass-walled office, she caught two employees whispering and pointing at her. Asked that the Coke girl? One laughed. "What's she carrying? Did she steal someone's homework?" Natalie kept walking, her face unreadable. She didn't need to respond, not yet. The folder in her hands was proof enough. As she reached the stairwell, a group of interns gathered at the landing. One, a wiry lad with a smug grin and a vape pen dangling from his fingers, called out, "Hey, you dropped something," tossing a crumpled napkin at her feet. "Pick it up, janitor lady," another mocked, laughter erupting. Natalie stopped, eyes flicking to the napkin and then to the group. She bent down slowly, picked it up, and tucked it into her pocket. "Thanks for the heads up," she said calmly, the tone so even it felt like a slap. The laughter caught in the boy's throat. Silence fell as Natalie climbed the stairs, her steps steady, her bag swinging lightly at her side. In the conference room. The door ajar, Natalie stepped inside. The long mahogany table gleamed under the ceiling lights. The room was empty, but the air felt charged, as if a storm was building. She set the folder down, fingers lingering on the cover, then stood still, eyes tracing the Manchester skyline through the window. The sticky soda, the laughter, the humiliation, they all faded. Her mind focused on the company, its numbers, its people, its rot. She'd been sent here to fix it, to cut out the dead weight. And already, she could see where to start. Just then, Vanessa's voice cut through the silence. "Hey, this room's for management only." Vanessa stood in the doorway, her red dress glowing under the fluorescent lights, like she was trying to outshine the room itself. "The training room's down by the copier. You know, where the trainees belong." Her tone was sharp, but there was a nervous edge to it, like she wasn't sure why Natalie was here. Natalie turned, locking eyes with Vanessa for a moment. Neither moved. Finally, Natalie said, "I must have misread the schedule," her voice calm, almost gentle, but the way she held Vanessa's gaze made the air crackle. Vanessa smirked, but it wobbled. "Yeah, well, don't let it happen again," she said, turning on her heel. Natalie watched her go, then picked up the folder and left, her steps as steady as ever. The day was far from over. The next morning at Ashford Enterprises' sleek Manchester headquarters, Natalie Carter's presence was as understated as ever. Her soft cream blouse was freshly pressed but still modest, the buttons done up to the collar without a hint of embellishment. Her charcoal gray slacks hung a little loose, as if borrowed in haste, the fabric whispering with every step she took across the polished marble floors. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a neat bun, exposing the delicate curve of her neck and the understated silver studs gleaming at her lobes. There was a quiet strength in her posture, a calm that contrasted sharply with the buzzing energy around her. The reception desk. A young woman named Tina glanced up, her lips pressed into a tight line, her heavily lined eyes betraying a mix of boredom and barely concealed disdain. "You're not on the list for today's CEO and chairwoman strategy meeting," she said flatly, barely looking up from her keyboard as her perfectly manicured nails tapped away. "Maybe you should check with HR again." Natalie's hazel eyes met Tina's for a moment, steady and unflinching. "Thank you," she said quietly, folding her hands calmly in front of her. Behind Tina, a few employees stifled chuckles, whispers rippling like a sudden draft through the rows of cubicles. "Trying to crash the meeting after yesterday's stunt," one muttered, loud enough for Natalie to hear. She didn't respond. Instead, she simply nodded and turned, walking toward the elevators with the same measured grace that had become her signature. Her black flats clicked softly on the marble, the sound echoing faintly in the vast lobby. Later that day, Natalie sat alone in the company cafeteria, a modest tray in front of her holding a simple sandwich and a bottle of water. The room buzzed with the usual midday chatter, but a group of creative directors, suits sharply pressed, egos even sharper, soon noticed her solitary presence. A woman named Charlotte Evans, known for her sharp jawline and diamond bracelet that caught the fluorescent light like a spotlight, approached Natalie with a condescending smile. "Sweetheart," Charlotte said, voice syrupy and dripping with disdain. "This table's for department heads. You're in the wrong spot again." She flicked her wrist carelessly, knocking Natalie's water bottle to the floor. The cap popped off, water pooling beneath the table. Her colleagues laughed, one already pulling out his phone to capture the moment. Natalie's hand hovered briefly over the spilled water. Then she looked up, eyes locking with Charlotte's steady and unyielding. "I'll clean it up," Natalie said softly but firmly. She knelt down, retrieving the bottle with deliberate grace. The room fell silent, the smug smile on Charlotte's face freezing as her confidence began to crack. Natalie stood and walked away, leaving the spilled water behind like a forgotten storm as she made her way back to her desk. A facilities coordinator named Brian, a burly man with a permanent scowl and clipboard in hand, intercepted her. "You're not authorized to use this floor's printer," he said sharply, pointing at the stack of budget reports in her hands. "Interns use the basement machines. Don't make me report you." A few passers-by slowed, smirking and whispering, one muttering, "She's really pushing her luck." Natalie's fingers tightened around the papers, but her face remained calm. "Check the signature on those," she said quietly, voice low but carrying an unmistakable authority. Brian flipped through the pages, his scowl fading as he saw the chairman's initials stamped on every sheet. He stammered, but Natalie was already walking away, leaving him clutching the papers as if they burned his fingers. The building hummed with activity as the morning wore on. In a spacious open-plan office, a senior strategist named Paul Denning, known for his booming voice and penchant for name-dropping, spotted Natalie standing quietly at the edge of a team huddle. "Hey, coffee girl," he barked, flashing his gold cufflinks. "Get me a latte, extra foam, and make it quick. You're not here to stand around looking lost." He tossed a 20-pound note at her feet, a cruel smirk plastered across his face. The room erupted with snickers and whispered bets as phones were raised to capture the moment. Natalie's gaze dropped to the bill, then lifted slowly to meet Paul's eyes. She didn't bend to pick up the money. "I don't drink coffee," she said quietly, her voice cutting sharply through the laughter like a wire pulled taut. Paul's face drained of color, his smirk vanishing. Before he could respond, Natalie turned and walked away, leaving the 20-pound note abandoned on the floor. Nearby, a timid intern slipped the bill into his pocket, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. To be why midday. Whispers spread across the office like wildfire. The intern was later seen in the CEO's office, handing over a list of names, with Paul Denning's right at the top. Back at the mixer that evening, the atmosphere had shifted. The wine flowed more freely, conversations grew louder, but Natalie remained on the sidelines. Her folder was safely tucked away in her bag, and she sipped water, eyes keenly observing the room. Connor Hayes sauntered over, his grin wide and mean. "Well, look who's still here," he sneered, holding a fresh glass of cola. Before Natalie could react, he tilted the glass, sending the fizzy liquid splashing across her blouse, hair, and face. The room froze. Then the laughter came again, sharp, cruel, like glass shattering. "She looks like she just climbed out of the basement," someone muttered. Another voice, louder, added, "Guess she's showcasing her adaptability." Huh. Natalie stood perfectly still, cola dripping from her chin, her eyes red but dry. She didn't wipe her face, didn't step back. She simply looked at Connor, her gaze steady and unblinking. His forced laugh faltered, and for a moment, he looked genuinely uncertain. Cold inside as the mixer wound down. A junior executive approached Natalie, clipboard in hand, lips pursed in a thin line. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice clipped, like scolding a child. She pointed to Natalie's badge, the word trainee glaring under the lights. "This is an invite-only event. I don't know who let you in, but you need to leave." Nearby, phones were raised, eager to capture the drama. Natalie's fingers tightened around her water glass, but her face remained calm. She set the glass down slowly, deliberately. "That I'll go," she said softly but clearly, her voice cutting through the murmurs as she walked toward the exit. A man in a corner office watched silently. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to the board. "Carter's here. They don't know." The junior executive smirked, oblivious that Natalie's shadow passed beneath the doorway, the laughter still echoing behind her. Margaret Lawson appeared, her face like stone. Without a word, she pointed to a security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily. Natalie's eyes followed, then flicked back to Connor. No words were needed. The room was already shifting. People whispered, glancing at their phones. Minutes later, the executive board reviewed security footage of Natalie, drenched in cola but standing tall as laughter roared around her. Someone gasped, "Oh my God, that's Carter." The head of HR, a balding man with a nervous tic, turned pale. "We're screwed," he muttered, voice barely audible. Natalie didn't react. She picked up her bag, the soda still dripping from her hair, and walked out, her flats silent on the carpet. Outside, the city lights flickered on as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Manchester's skyline, and somewhere in the depths of the building, a new game had begun. The following day, Natalie sat alone in the bustling cafeteria, her modest tray holding only a crisp apple and a bottle of water. The midday rush filled the room with chatter and laughter, but Natalie remained an island of calm. Around her, clusters of data analysts hunched over laptops, their conversations punctuated by the tapping of keys and the clinking of coffee cups. A woman named Felicity Grant, known for her sharp business acumen and sleek chignon, noticed Natalie's solitary presence. Her voice carried across the room like a foghorn as she stood up and approached, hands planted firmly on her hips. "You're in my seat," Felicity declared, eyes narrowing. "This is where the analytics team sits, not wherever it is you belong." She gestured pointedly at Natalie's plain outfit, the slightly loose gray slacks, the simple cream blouse, and the sensible black flats. Her colleagues snickered behind her, their eyes gleaming with dismissive amusement. Natalie's fingers paused on the apple she was about to bite. Then she lifted her gaze to meet Felicity's. "It's yours now," she said quietly, standing and picking up her tray. Felicity's confident smile faltered, her smirk wavering as Natalie's steady eyes held her in place. Without another word, Natalie walked away, leaving a silence that rippled through the room like a falling domino. Unbeknownst to her, a quiet server nearby, who had been watching the exchange with quiet sympathy, slipped a note to the cafeteria manager detailing the incident and naming Felicity. The next morning, Natalie returned to Ashford's headquarters, her blouse freshly pressed and plain, her slacks still a shade too loose. Her badge, clipped to her belt, gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a small but significant symbol of her hidden authority. At tea reception, Tina gave her a tight smile but barely looked up from her screen. "You're not on the list for today's CEO and chairwoman strategy meeting," Tina said flatly. "Better check with HR." A few employees nearby snickered, their whispers like a chorus of vultures circling. Natalie didn't respond. Instead, she folded her hands calmly and waited for the elevator, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Later, during a lunch break, Natalie sat alone at a quiet table, her simple sandwich and water bottle untouched. A group of creative directors, their suits impeccable and their egos towering, spotted her and approached. Charlotte Evans, the woman with the diamond bracelet and sharp jawline from the cafeteria, leaned over the table, her voice syrupy with condescension. "Sweetie, this table's for department heads. You're in the wrong spot again." She flicked her wrist, knocking Natalie's water bottle to the floor. The cap popped off, water pooling beneath the table. The others laughed, some already recording the spill on their phones. Zooming in on Natalie's soaked flats, Natalie's eyes met Charlotte's, steady and unyielding. "I'll clean it up," she said quietly but firmly. She knelt down, retrieving the bottle with slow, deliberate grace. The room fell silent, Charlotte's smile freezing as her confidence cracked. Natalie stood and walked away, leaving the spilled water behind like a forgotten storm. Back in the hallway, Brian, the facilities coordinator with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, intercepted her. "You're not authorized to use this floor's printer," he said sharply, pointing at the stack of budget reports. "Interns use the basement machines. Don't make me report you." A few passersby slowed, smirking and whispering. "She's really pushing her luck," one muttered. Natalie's fingers tightened around the papers, but her face remained calm. "Check the signature on those," she said quietly, her voice low but carrying unmistakable authority. Brian flipped through the pages, his scowl fading as he saw the chairman's initials stamped on every sheet. He stammered, but Natalie was already walking away, leaving him clutching the papers as if they burned his fingers. By late afternoon, the building hummed with tension. In an open-plan office, Paul Denning, the senior strategist with his booming voice and gold cufflinks, spotted Natalie standing quietly at the edge of a team huddle. "Hey, coffee girl," he barked. "Get me a latte, extra foam, and make it quick. You're not here to stand around looking lost." He tossed a 20-pound note at her feet, his smirk cruel and mocking. The room erupted with snickers, phones already out to capture the moment. Natalie's gaze dropped to the bill, then lifted slowly to meet Paul's eyes. She didn't bend to pick up the money. "I don't drink coffee," she said quietly, her voice cutting sharply through the laughter like a knife. Paul's face drained of color. Before he could respond, Natalie turned and walked away, leaving the 20-pound note abandoned on the floor, and in turn nearby slipped the bill into his pocket. Eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. By evening, whispers spread through Ashford like wildfire. The intern was later seen in the CEO's office, handing over a list of names, with Paul Denning's right at the top. Meanwhile, back at the corporate mixer, the mood had shifted. Wine flowed more freely, conversations grew louder, but Natalie remained on the outskirts, her folder safely tucked away. Connor Hayes sauntered over, his grin wide and mean. "Well, look who's still here," he sneered, holding a fresh glass of cola. Before Natalie could move, he tilted the glass, sending the fizzy liquid splashing across her blouse, hair, and face. The room froze. Then the laughter came again, sharp, cruel, like glass shattering. "She looks like she just climbed out of the basement," someone muttered. Another voice, louder, added, "Guess she's showcasing her adaptability." Natalie stood perfectly still, cola dripping from her chin, eyes red but dry. She didn't wipe her face, didn't step back. She simply looked at Connor, gaze steady and unblinking. His forced laugh faltered, and for a moment, he looked genuinely uncertain, cold inside as the mixer wound down. A junior executive approached Natalie, clipboard in hand, lips pursed. "You're not supposed to be here," she said sharply, pointing to Natalie's badge, the word trainee glaring under the lights. "This is an invite-only event. I don't know who let you in, but you need to leave." Nearby, phones were raised, eager to capture the drama. Natalie's fingers tightened around her water glass, but her face remained calm. She set the glass down slowly, deliberately. "I'll go," she said softly but clearly, voice cutting through the murmurs as she walked toward the exit. A man in a corner office watched silently. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to the board. "Carter's here. They don't know." The junior executive smirked, oblivious. Natalie's shadow passed beneath the doorway, the laughter still echoing behind her. Margaret Lawson appeared, her face like stone. Without a word, she pointed to a security camera blinking red in the corner. Natalie's eyes followed, then flicked back to Connor. No words were needed. The room was already shifting. Minutes later, the executive board reviewed the security footage. Natalie drenched in cola but standing tall as laughter roared around her. Someone gasped, "Oh my God, that's Carter." The head of HR, a balding man with a nervous tic, turned pale. "We're screwed," he muttered. Natalie didn't react. She picked up her bag, the soda still dripping from her hair, and walked out, her flats silent on the carpet. Outside, the Manchester skyline glittered under the fading sun, steel and glass catching the dying light. And somewhere deep inside Ashford Enterprises, a new game had begun. But the question lingered in the air like smoke. Who would survive the coming storm, and who would be the first to fall? The following morning, Manchester's gray skies hung low over Ashford Enterprises as Natalie Carter entered the building with a quiet determination that seemed to ripple through the marble lobby. Her blouse was crisp and white, tucked neatly into tailored charcoal slacks that skimmed her hips just right, hinting at the elegant figure beneath without drawing unnecessary attention. Her dark hair was swept into a loose chignon, a few tendrils escaping to soften the severe bun, framing her face with a subtle grace. Around her neck, a delicate silver locket rested just above the collarbone, catching the light with every measured step she took to the reception desk. Tina's eyes flickered up from her keyboard, narrowing slightly as she took in Natalie's presence. "You're not on the list for the CEO's strategy meeting today," she said, voice clipped but with a trace of curiosity underneath. "Maybe check with HR again." Natalie met her gaze steadily, lips curving into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Tina. I'll do that." Tina blinked, momentarily disarmed by the quiet confidence in Natalie's tone, but quickly masked it with a shrug and a forced smile. Nearby, a few employees exchanged glances, their whispers like low ripples in a still pond. Natalie didn't respond to the murmurs. Instead, she moved toward the elevator bank, her black flats clicking softly on the polished floor, the rhythmic sound echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet lobby. Later that morning, she found herself in the bustling cafeteria, a simple tray holding a sandwich and a bottle of water before her. The room buzzed with lunchtime chatter, but Natalie sat alone, her posture composed, eyes scanning the room with a calm, calculating gaze. A group of creative directors noticed her solitary presence. Among them, Charlotte Evans, known for her sharp angles and sharper tongue, approached with a smile that barely concealed her disdain. Her diamond bracelet caught the overhead lights, sparkling like a warning. "Sweetheart," Charlotte said, voice dripping with condescension, "this table's for department heads. You're in the wrong spot again." With a flick of her wrist, Charlotte knocked Natalie's water bottle to the floor. The cap popped off, water pooling beneath the table. Laughter erupted as phones were raised, cameras flashing. Natalie's eyes met Charlotte's, unwavering and serene. "I'll clean it up," she said softly but firmly. She knelt, fingers grazing the cool floor as she retrieved the bottle with deliberate care. The room fell silent, the smug smile on Charlotte's face flickering and fading. Natalie rose, leaving behind the spilled water and a silence heavy with unsettled pride as she walked through the corridors. Brian, the facilities coordinator with his ever-present clipboard and furrowed brow, stepped out to block her path. "You're not authorized to use this floor's printer," he said sharply, eyeing the stack of budget reports in her hands. "Interns use the basement machines. Don't make me report you." A few passers-by slowed, some smirking, whispering, "She's really pushing her luck." Natalie's fingers tightened around the papers. Her voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge of command. "Check the signature on those." Brian flipped through the documents, his scowl melting into stunned recognition as he saw the chairman's initials on every page. He stammered, unable to find words. Natalie turned and walked away, leaving him clutching the papers as if they burned his fingers. By mid-afternoon, tension simmered beneath the surface of the open-plan office. Paul Denning, the senior strategist with his booming voice and gold cufflinks, spotted Natalie standing quietly at the edge of a team huddle. "Hey, coffee girl," he barked, flashing a cruel grin. "Get me a latte, extra foam, and make it quick. You're not here to stand around looking lost." He tossed a 20-pound note at her feet, the room erupting with snickers and the glow of phone screens poised to capture the moment. Natalie's gaze dropped to the money, then lifted slowly to meet Paul's eyes. She didn't bend to pick it up. "I don't drink coffee," she said softly, her voice cold and precise. Paul's face blanched. Before he could respond, Natalie turned and walked away, leaving the money abandoned on the floor. Nearby, a timid intern slipped the bill into his pocket, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. That evening, the corporate mixer was underway. Wine flowed freely, conversations grew louder, but Natalie remained on the sidelines, folder safely tucked away, water glass in hand. Connor Hayes, his grin wide and malicious, approached. "Well, look who's still here," he sneered, brandishing a glass of cola. Before she could react, he tilted the glass, sending the fizzy liquid crashing over her blouse, hair, and face. The room froze. Then laughter erupted, sharp, cruel, like shattering glass. "She looks like she just climbed out of the basement," someone murmured. Another voice, louder, added, "Guess she's showcasing her adaptability." Natalie stood still, cola dripping from her chin, eyes red but dry. She didn't wipe away the soda or step back. Instead, she locked eyes with Connor, calm and unblinking. His forced laugh faltered. For a moment, genuine uncertainty flickered across his face as the mixer wound down. A junior executive approached, clipboard in hand, lips pursed. "You're not supposed to be here," she said sharply, pointing at Natalie's trainee badge. "This is an invite-only event. I don't know who let you in, but you need to leave." Nearby, phones were raised, eager to capture the confrontation. Natalie's fingers clenched her water glass, but her face remained serene. She set the glass down slowly, deliberately. "I'll go," she said softly, voice cutting through the murmurs as she walked toward the exit. A man standing in a corner office watched silently. He pulled out his phone and sent a text. "Carter's here. They don't know." The junior executive smirked, unaware. Natalie's shadow slipped beneath the doorway, the cruel laughter still echoing behind her. Margaret Lawson appeared, face like stone, and without a word, pointed to a security camera blinking red in the corner. Natalie's eyes flicked to the camera, then back to Connor, and no words were needed. The room was shifting. Minutes later, the executive board reviewed footage. Natalie, drenched in cola, standing tall amidst the roaring laughter. Someone gasped, "Oh my God, that's Carter." The head of HR, a balding man with a nervous tic, paled. "We're screwed," he muttered. Natalie didn't react. She picked up her bag, soda still dripping from her hair, and walked out, flats silent on the carpet. Outside, Manchester's skyline shimmered beneath the twilight, steel and glass catching the fading light. That a storm was coming, and in the shadows of Ashford Enterprises, a quiet revolution had begun. But the question lingered like a ghost. Who would rise? And who would be sacrificed to the flames? The morning after the mixer's chaos, Ashford Enterprises hummed with an undercurrent of tension that was impossible to ignore. Natalie Carter arrived at the office just as dawn broke over Manchester, the pale sunlight casting long shadows across the steel and glass facade of the building. Her appearance was immaculate. This time, a tailored ivory blouse hugged her slender frame, subtly sheer but tasteful, paired with high-waisted charcoal trousers that accentuated the long lines of her legs. Her black leather loafers tapped softly on the marble floor, a rhythmic punctuation in the otherwise quiet lobby. Her dark hair was styled in loose waves cascading over her shoulders for the first time that week, softening the sharp angles of her face and lending an unexpected warmth to her presence. A thin gold chain glinted at her collarbone, the pendant, a small key, resting just above the neckline. The reception desk. Tina glanced up, surprise flickering across her face as Natalie approached. "Miss Carter," she said, voice a notch less cold than before, "you're expected in the CEO's office." "Early meeting," Natalie offered a gracious nod, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Thank you, Tina." The elevator doors slid open silently, and Natalie stepped inside, the soft hum of the lift carrying her upwards. As the doors closed, her eyes settled on her reflection in the polished metal, composed, unyielding, yet carrying a spark of something new. Quiet authority. Jonathan Ashford's office was a sleek expanse of glass and walnut, the Manchester skyline stretching behind him like a backdrop to a stage. He stood as she entered, offering a slight bow, the kind of gesture that was rare in the corporate world but spoke volumes of respect. "Carter," he said, voice firm but warm, "the board is ready for your presentation. They're eager to hear your vision." Natalie nodded, stepping forward with the folder she carried under one arm, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. Inside were the blueprints to the future she intended to build, plans that would shake Ashford Enterprises to its core. The boardroom was already filled with heavy suits and heavier expectations. Around the long mahogany table sat the executives who had watched her stumble in like a whisper but would soon learn to hear her roar. Jared Mitchell and Vanessa Blythe were notably absent, their seats empty like wounds in the fabric of the company. The room fell silent as Natalie approached the head of the table. Her voice was steady, clear, and commanding. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Ashford Enterprises is at a crossroads. Our current trajectory is unsustainable. The market demands agility, innovation, and leadership grounded in integrity, not entitlement." Heads nodded, pens poised. Natalie's hazel eyes swept the room, catching every flicker of reaction, every subtle shift. "Effective immediately, we will begin a comprehensive restructuring. This will involve difficult decisions but necessary ones. Our future depends on it." A grizzled board member, Sir Robert Langley, cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, your family legacy is well known. We have waited for your guidance. Please, share your plan." Natalie unfolded the blueprint with practiced grace, revealing charts, projections, and personnel reviews. "We will eliminate redundancies, streamline operations, and invest heavily in emerging markets and technology. I will personally oversee these changes." The room was captivated, the weight of her words sinking in. Her presence filled the space. Not just a trainee anymore, but the rightful leader. Later, as the meeting adjourned, whispers spread like wildfire. The company was on the brink of transformation, and no one was safe from scrutiny. Back in the corridors, whispers followed Natalie like a shadow. Some watched with hope, others with fear. A young junior designer, Emily, who had offered a shy smile in the hallway days before, found herself summoned to Natalie's office. Instead of a reprimand, she was handed a promotion. Her eyes wide with disbelief, Natalie's voice was soft but firm. "You have potential. Don't waste it." Word of the restructuring leaked quickly, and the media soon picked up the story. Headlines like "From Trainee to Titan," "Natalie Carter's Rise at Ashford" splashed across business sections nationwide. Meanwhile, Jared's internship offers vanished overnight, and Vanessa's LinkedIn profile disappeared without a trace. Despite the upheaval, Natalie, never gloating or smirking, continued her work with relentless focus. Her desk became a command center, reports and calls from the European parent company filling her days. One late afternoon, after the office had quieted, Natalie found herself on the rooftop terrace of Ashford Enterprises. The wind tugged gently at her silk blouse, now a soft of gray, and her hair, loose in waves, caught the fading sunlight. She stood at the railing, gazing out over the city's steel and glass, the noise of the streets below a distant hum. Behind her, footsteps approached. Steady, familiar, her husband, Michael, tall and unassuming, stood beside her. His presence was a calm anchor, the kind of quiet strength that needed no words. Natalie turned to him, eyes softening for the first time that day. "I didn't need rescuing," she whispered. "But it's good to know I'm not alone." Michael smiled, his hand finding hers in the cool evening air as the city lights flickered on. Natalie's gaze drifted to the horizon, where shadows lengthened and secrets stirred. A new chapter had begun. But lurking beneath the surface was a question no one dared voice aloud. Who was still watching? And what price would be paid when the past finally caught up? The game was far from over.